Hello and welcome to the Love and Cherish podcast with me, Laura Howe. Today I'm joined by the lovely Dr. Samantha Whiten, aka Psych Mom. Samantha is a very straight talking licensed psychologist who works with individuals and couples. Samantha, you caught my attention because you appear to have what I would call a positive attitude towards sex, in that you seem to have the stance that sex is part of a healthy marriage or a healthy relationship. And I thought I'd really love to have you on the show and perhaps have that conversation. So I guess a very warm welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Yes. And I'm really glad to be here. And I saw you with Dad Starting Over. So I'm excited to be, your next person. I'm sure you've had people in between.
Yeah, not too many, Samantha. I think you might be number four or five. I'm not sure. This really is very much the beginning for me.
On the Dr. Psych Mom show, I do not have a lot of guests, although I am ramping up. So, maybe one day you'll be on my podcast as well.
I would love that. That would be a real honor. That would be, and something I'd very much look forward to. So can we begin? Can I ask you my first question? I'm very eager to have you answer it because, yes, as I've said, as a therapist who is interested in talking about sex, wants to talk about sex. Many of my couples do also. It was very refreshing to find you, another therapist who appears to believe that conversation might be part of the therapeutic journey for couples. So yes, why do you think sex is important in marriage?
Well, that's obviously a super big question. And really, I did even a podcast episode about this, like, why do I really focus on this so much? And the reality is it's for kind of keeping families together almost, I work with a lot of I'm Dr. Psych Mom, right? So most of the people that come in have children. And when they have children, this is a very child-centered culture. And it seems like almost immediately, if I'm having children, many couples stop being a couple and they transition solely into a family. And all of the couple identity, including sex and romance, goes away. And in a bitter irony, sometimes that leads to divorce, right? And that it breaks up the family if the couple does not remain a strong couple. And the children also have no idea how to be in a romantic relationship one day if one is not modeled for them. And it's really hard to model a romantic relationship when you're not having any sexual relationship because you're not even a couple anymore. So having a close and connected, intimate relationship for a couple includes sex. It includes sex before the kids come on the scene. So it probably should include sex after kids come on the scene too. And couples that maintain that strong bond tend to raise happier kids and have a more connected, integrated, relaxed family.
I do. It reminds me, I had a lovely conversation with a beautiful woman who contacted me in the middle of the night from Canada, and she was so eager to talk to me, and we eventually set up a call. And she told me that she has 5 children, and she describes the marriage and the child rearing experience, which is obviously long if you've got 5. She said that the first 2 children experienced a completely different marriage to the second 3 children because midway point, she worked out that sex was absolutely crucial for her marriage. And I'm not going to go into the details of why she worked that out, but she said that the 2 children, the first 2 children, in talking to them later on in life, they've asked, what was wrong with you and Dad? Was it stress? Was it money? And she said to them, because they're grown up, she said, no, it was sex. It was that your dad and I had not kept that in place or reestablished that or whatever. So we just weren't anywhere near as happy as the second 3 children, which I just find that so interesting. interesting. And she does say that the personalities of the children and how they've experienced life as a result of the different tone in the marriage is very different.
Right. And that's fascinating. And that's kind of like a single case design experiment.
It
right?
is.
What happens when you take away sex? What happens when you put sex back in? I mean, and they actually, like, the outcome variable is the children. Children who grow up seeing a disconnected couple, I mean, there's such a range of pretty negative outcomes. For example, they may see one parent, usually the guy, pursuing the other parent, not always, of course, the guy, and getting rejected. So if you're a boy, seeing your dad constantly get rejected, even for a kiss, and you identify with your father, boy puts his father on a pedestal. Well, if even my dad is getting rejected consistently for affection, how could I expect to get affection within a relationship later on? Sexless marriages go down the generations. Rarely do I have a couple in session where they're struggling with sexlessness and sex issues, but neither one of them saw that in their family of origin. At least one, and frequently both, saw a low affection marriage that they sometimes were told was sexless.
100%. I've noticed it with our we've only got one kid, our lovely Charlie. He's just approaching 13, but partly because I'm sensitive, so I kind of pay attention to kind of how he responds given at whatever's going on in front of him. And I've noticed that his delight when Russell and I are close, when his dad and I are close, when we're touching, when we're laughing, when we're having a nice time, you can see it looks like it just settles him. He just glows. He glows under that. And conversely, when Russell and I are, when we're at each other, when we're doing the opposite of that thing, when we're in some kind of conflict or there's something going on, that it's just palpable, isn't it? That kind of tension. And there's no doubt in my mind that the difference between those two things for children.
Yeah, and it's so easy, not easily, but it is quickly changed. So, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the same thing as well. As you work with couples, if they start even in a fake it till you make it kind of way to touch each other, to look at each other, to hold hands even, or anything like that, children respond, especially little children that are more free with their expressing their emotions. They respond almost immediately to that change of frame, and they're happy, and they come in for a hug also. And it kind of feels like the family unit is more secure when the couple is secure, even though children obviously could not articulate that. It's something that they feel.
Well, we're a hugely sensitive species, aren't we? I think because I like that I read the highly sensitive person thing, and I like that as a framework, and I think that there are obviously differences perhaps in terms of how sensitive, but it has dawned on me more recently that of course we're a hugely sensitive species, aren't we? So of course children, they don't know what they're seeing, but they feel it. They're obviously sensitive to it, and you can't hide it. So you can't pretend to be well connected. You can't pretend to have a loving bond. You do or you don't.
Yeah, it's like people would not send their child to a school where the teachers hated each other. But yet, they act like they hate each other in the family, where the child is more hours than they are at school. At school, you want the teachers to like each other and be joking around and happy and smiling. Well, obviously then, right?
Yeah.
You would want the same thing in the home.
That's so true.
Hard to do that.
Yeah, that's very true. It's so true. It's funny, isn't it? When it comes to sort of how you treat your spouse, it never ceases to shock me, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, how comfortable people are with treating their spouse like shit. And if you say you wouldn't do it to your kids, and they're like, yeah, of course I wouldn't do it to my kids, but you can treat your spouse really quite badly, and people don't seem, I don't know what to make of that, but it's definitely something that I ponder on.
Yeah, I call it the CCF reframe. child, coworker, friend. If you would not treat your child, coworker, or friend like you're treating your spouse, then why are you treating your spouse that way? Because that encompasses everybody. Because if you say, why would you treat your spouse like you wouldn't treat your child? They say, well, because my spouse is a grown up. Well,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
What about a coworker?
Yeah.
Well, my coworker's going to pay. Well, what about a friend then? What about a friend? Would you be so miserable when a friend said, do you want to hang out? Or when a friend shared something about their day? If a friend shared something about their day, would you say, I can't deal with that right now? Don't talk to me. No, you wouldn't have a friend anymore,
Yeah,
right?
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
So true. And of course that's complex, isn't it? Perhaps. I mean, I think for some, when you get to this sort of issues of the conversation, about childhood, and it's like, well, the atmosphere in their family home was dreadful. Their mum and dad didn't touch, and it's, then if you press even further and you get the client to think about what their relationship with men is like, on a sort of deeper level, then you're going to find gold in those places. But getting people to recognize that these things, the roots of this stuff tend to run quite deeply. And I think a lot of people aren't even that conscious until you point it out. And to be fair, I wasn't. I remember my husband saying to me years and years ago, how come you can answer the door? You can be just treating me really badly, and then you'll answer the door, and then my demeanor. Yeah, I'm like, hi, how are you doing? It's good to see you. And I, I might not have said, because I'm not particularly good at acknowledging my flaws immediately. But I remember that piece of information landing like a stone. It's like, I can't argue with that.
Yes, or when I say to clients in the middle of a fight, they said, the pursuer said, I can't stop, going after them. And I say, but what if your child's school called? They said, well, let's stop.
Yeah, sure. It's true. It's so true. So back to sex, because so many of my viewers are sort of interested in the conversation regarding sex, because I do think that getting sex right in long-term relationships is obviously a bloody nightmare, because a lot of people are just not managing to make that work. So my next very direct question, I'm sure you're going to say again, it's such a big question. Again, I know it's not easy to answer, but is sex a healthy need?
I believe that sex is a healthy need within a relationship. It is obviously not like air or water or food. But I have, I actually have a podcast, it's Sex, a Need or a Want, on my show. And people will say like date night is a need, or like conversation is a need.
Yeah.
If you are fleeing the Nazis, conversation's not a need. You know what I mean? Like, if we are like under attack, you don't like need to talk about your day. But people say, I need to have a conversation to be married. That's a need. But then why would physical intimacy not be a need? A child, in fact, needs a hug and a kiss. I think most parents would say that that is a need. That need doesn't just go away when you get older, the need for any sort of physical intimacy. And I will tell you that, sexual or not, like there's some sort of false dichotomy set up as though there's all these people having so much physically affectionate touch and hugs and kisses, but just no sex.
Yeah.
That's not true.
No.
That's not true. Weren't having sex, they're not touching either. So it's all kind of one thing, unless it is postmenopause. She's got vaginal atrophy and they cuddle a lot, but the intercourse is painful. This is a minority of the people that come in, because men are not stupid. They could understand something like one's vagina does not work, and within the context of a loving relationship, she might usually explore that with a healthcare provider. But there are people who come in sexless marriages, all ages. And what I have never seen is hugging, kissing, making out, touching, scalp rub, back rub, but they just don't have sex. That isn't a thing. Increasingly, I see that now in the age of, birth control and everything, obviously that was there when I started my practice as well. But even over the years, I have seen that now sexless marriages basically mean a touchless marriage. Basically, that's the equivalent of touch. And I think that touch is a human need. I do think that touch is a human need foremost. maybe not all, certainly some people are touch averse, but if it is one of your things that you take as comfort and love, then I think it is a need in as much as conversation is a need, or date nights are a need, or hobbies are a need, or self-actualization is a need, or therapy is a need, or any of these things that are need and want.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a good argument, because I've literally had that sort of argument come up in therapy last week. It was somebody said, well, surely you need an emotional attachment. You need an emotional connection to want to have sex. But I kind of, what you're saying is, it's like, but what if they need the sex to want to give the emotional connection? So who's, it's like I don't know, it's like a standoff, or a sort of everybody loses kind of a deal, isn't it? It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So I like that. It's like, well, what's the difference between that and all the other things that people say they need?
Right. And the point is that in anything that is even remotely resembling a workable relationship with somebody who is not a sociopath, they are getting more of their emotional needs met during the day by just basic conversation.
Yeah.
Of course, if let's say a woman's in a situation, her husband says, I refuse to speak to you until you have sex with me. Get out. That is some crazy stuff. I mean, I wouldn't even get into couples counseling, move out. I don't care. But I have not seen anybody say, I will not, in fact, talk to you during dinner tonight in front of the children because we don't have sex. I've not seen anybody say that, right? So then they are getting more of an emotional connection, often with somebody who has no idea, by the way, how to give an emotional connection, which is what our work is for.
Yeah.
Couples work to teach people how to be better at connecting. But just to assume that somebody is withholding an emotional connection, often the man who wants sex is not withholding anything. He would love to figure out how to connect with her emotionally. He just can't figure it out.
Yeah.
And then when it becomes a couple saying, oh, wow. So just like how she has a problem with sexual intimacy, she has a problem with emotional intimacy. Both of these people did not see very close, happy marriages growing up. They have no template in reality for how to be in a functional, loving, connected marriage. So maybe that's the problem, instead of it being erotic sex versus her not wanting sex and then being at odds with one another.
Bingo. That's so true. And I loved your point about the kind of the emotional connection is way more likely to be present when sex can be so completely off the table for so many people. There's just nothing happening there at all. They're literally being starved out. So my next question is, why do so many people not seem to know that? And before I move on, actually, before we get to that, sorry, the one of the common things that I've heard, and this is just not just in practice, this is personally, I've heard many people joke about this, and I have to say it's predominantly from women, and you'll get why when I say the thing, but they say, he's got a hand. He's got a hand. Why can't he just take care of himself? If it's a need, why is the need not, to their point? Because that's the question that they have. It's like, well, why do I need to do something regarding that need, that so-called need, when he can just sort himself out?
Right. And the equivalent would be him saying, well, if she needs an emotional connection, why doesn't she talk to her therapist, her mother, her sister, her friend, her coworkers, the children, the dog, etc.? So there's something in the need that the woman says is to emotionally connect with her husband. And I understand that many men are not doing that, right?
Yeah,
in any
sure.
sort of that's meaningful to her.
That's right.
But also what his need isn't to ejaculate, because yes, most men have figured out how to accomplish that.
By age 14 at least.
Yeah. Right. So therefore, what they're saying their need is to connect in that physical, sexual, romantic way with their wives. And this is a problem that many men have with communicating. And a lot of people that come in to see me, the man has thought that it went without saying that love was why he wanted to have sex with her. Of course, he could also masturbate. And he thought it went without saying, because to him, if she initiates sex, it means approval, acceptance, love, adoration, like all these good things. So he thought, of course, that's what she knows that it means to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Whereas to her, particularly if she was raised to distrust men or she's had prior negative sexual experiences, then, she doesn't think about it like that at all. She assumes it isn't just ejaculation. And also, many men are not, they don't have a lot of knowledge about sex. So if really their sexual experience is him rolling over and just sticking it in, well, guess what? It's going to be hard to convince her that that's an act of love. I mean, there's so many layers to this, and not every man thinks about it as an act of love either. So the ones that don't, right? So there's men that are cheating on their wives with multiple prostitutes, And so sex really does not have anything to do with love in that scenario, the same sort of way. It is a deeper way to meet certain needs. Obviously, that person is not in good mental health, I wouldn't think, if they're doing that. But the point is that, so let's say a woman, I mean, sorry to hijack, but I think it's a good, so let's say that the woman, she's had a couple sexual experiences before her husband. It's a pretty common scenario. They were all in like college, or she was kind of drunk. They were drunk, and it was just these guys who just wanted to get off, right? So then she meets her husband and she thinks, oh, he's a great guy, but sex for men is just wanting to get off, because that's what it is. That is the definition of it. And so I will do that thing as long as we feel close and loving. Of course I will do that thing, But then they have a baby, they drop out of the honeymoon stage, something happens, he's depressed, she's depressed, some stress, will somebody lose a job? Guess what? He's not connecting so much in that way. She never thought about it as a form of connection before. She thought about it as a way for men to get the off, So then how's it going to change for her at that late date? And he probably is as inarticulate as a doorknob, because the average person doesn't talk about sex, doesn't express their emotions about sex at all. So then that couple is at an impasse, and hopefully they come into couples counseling, or else they're going to get divorced. I mean, it's such a confluence of events. First of all, if the men look at porn, then she already thinks, well, he's looking at porn, so then therefore he just likes to look at hot women and get hard and get off, right? So then it's not about me, it's about any woman and whatever. If he wants to be faithful and be a good guy, then I'm the only game in town, so he'll ejaculate into me. Likely he's still thinking about those other women. It's just, they'll just have this need, and that's how it is. Secondly, as I said previously, as you said, these sexless marriages come down through generations. So many people, when you dig into it, they heard their parents have sex and their parents hated each other, or they were cold and distant. So then right from go, they think my parents, who can't stand to look at each other during the day, they're doing this thing at night. It just must be something my mother's going along with. I don't want to be like that, right? And then, of course, there is the very real fact that many people do not know how to have sex that is fulfilling to both partners. I have a sexologist on my staff, and she's recorded videos like female pleasure, like the guide to female pleasure, lick it right, like also a blowjob one. But point being, like, a lot of men with the best of intentions have an experience with women. They don't even know why foreplay is required. Do you know that they say on the internet, some men say, they've said in my comments, that a woman only needs foreplay if she doesn't find you attractive? That's like a thing.
Where do they get this stuff from?
Because they're watching a lot of porn, and in porn, the woman finds the guy attractive to go within 30 seconds, right? So they think, well, she needs me to do this whole thing, touch her here, do this, back rub, because I'm the beta or whatever that is. And, and she was really into me that she wouldn't need that. So they try to have this porn style sex that is not fulfilling to the woman. It doesn't make her feel loved. And then every time she does it, instead of feeling closer and closer, she feels more and more distant. And by the time that I get them in session, by the way, frequently she has to tell him that she doesn't really have orgasms the way that he assumes she does. It's maybe once every so often, maybe not at all. So there is just so much lack of communication around sex, and there's lack of an insight as to how early experiences shape attitudes around sex. And all of these variables can be discussed so productively in marital counseling, and people just don't do it. And they go to these marital counselors that never talk about sex, which is right?
Well,
You
that
see
was
that
the
same
thing. That
thing.
was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I do think that it's like that. I don't actually have any evidence on this. It'd be amazing to do some work around it to kind of. I'm not good with stats, so it would never be me that did it. But I'd love to. I'd love to work. Is there a way of working out how many marriage therapists or therapists generally are actually sexual, are actually pro-sex, are having a great time sexually, psychosexually themselves in their own, in their relationships? I just get this strong sense that in terms of the landscape, the therapeutic landscape, that it's not sexy. There's no sex occurring. There's no conversation. It's not part of therapy. It seems, it may be different in the States, but in England, it just feels like there's this sort of silence and tumbleweed when it comes to that aspect of human life even.
Yeah, I mean, we see that as well. I have numerous clients who come in and they say, oh, it's been to multiple, therapists before. We've been in therapy for years. I say, did you talk about the sex life? Nope. Therapy for years did not talk about the sex life. And that is common. And there is a lot of talk about the negative sides of sex, about like coercion and about exploited and violated and all sorts of things. There is not as much of an emphasis on healthy sex, education about sex, education about how drive changes over the span, the honeymoon stage, dropping out of that, perimenopause and menopause. I mean, there's even just what happens when you're like literally like when I breastfed 3 kids, and I remember with the first, because my kids are 15, 13, 11. So this was already 15 years ago. And I remember like my sex drive just shut off when I was breastfeeding. I was like, what? Like, that's like, what is even happening? I had to like Google it, because of course, I don't know about your training, but our training about sex in my graduate program was zero.
Me too.
Was
nothing.
complete.
Nothing.
So everything has been continuing education and self-education, etc. Yeah.
Me too.
I would listen to anybody, read any book, any sort of continuing ed. But point being, like, I had no idea, and I was a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I had no idea that the idea of there being like any sort of emphasis of hormones, it's all,
I know.
it's all very obscure. And that women in their, I mean, I don't remember, I'm like you, so I don't remember the exact numbers on this, but women die more in surgery in their luteal phase than in their pre-ovulation phase, in their follicular phase. Our body is just kind of like all messed up in the second half of the cycle.
Yeah.
And of course, our drive is down then. We're weaker, we're more tired, and all of this. I didn't know that till I was in my 30s, and I have my doctorate.
No. Same. So, I mean, I just didn't really know anything about my menstrual cycle whatsoever. Again, it like sex, really, it's all been self-taught out of necessity. And it's been in relationship. I have to say, my husband's played a major role in that, because he cares about himself and because he cares about me. He started to notice that there were reoccurring patterns around certain times. I was, unbearable to be around, not now, because we've done our own research, because we've come to understand it. But the culture never told me anything about that. My mother certainly never taught. It was all about sort of tampons and how to sort of manage the sort of period, but nothing to do with what it means to be female, and what this cycle brings to your life, to your husband's life, to your children's life. It just did. No one said anything.
Yep. It's changing now, thankfully, for the better a little bit. I see all these little cute young influencers that are like 25 showing that, like, when they're in their follicular phase, they want to party. But then when they're phase, they put the blanket on and they want, and then when they're premenstrual, they get really upset. And this is very educational for a lot of people who have no idea. And things like the Aura Ring are very helpful for people, and period trackers, because once you know what you're looking for, because some of my clients, I don't know about you, but I see a lot of people every other week, and when you're on the stage of ovulation and then menstruation, my God, like ovulation, she's like, oh my God, he's so funny. This is what he said, just so funny. I'm like, what? Like last week you hated him. You want to get divorced. And guess what? Next week you're going to hate him again unless we start to kind of understand what's going on.
Well, 100%. I've just started working with women around it. I introduce them to that side of themselves as part of their therapy, because I just don't think you can really help a woman with her mental health if she doesn't understand that, that there's just no way to do that. So again, bringing us back back to sex and marriage. So the vast proportion of my audience are definitely they're experiencing what you would call a sexless marriage. And when I say sexless, it does appear sexless. For some of them, it's they go many months. For other I'd have to say it's predominantly men. My channel is predominantly men. I think I've got 6% female viewers. So it's predominantly men, and yes, they're going many months, sometimes decades, absolute, many years. So why do you think that phenomenon, sexlessness in marriage, has always been a thing? Do you think it's always well, the answer is yes, but do you think it's got worse? Why is sexlessness in marriage such a common thing?
Well, so again, multi-layered here. So women used to just kind of stop having sex at a certain point. And like in menopause, if it hurts, etc. If a guy is not like a real asshole, he's not going to push his wife to do something that hurts her. And then a lot of people just stop having sex, There was more infidelity in previous generations, as you may have read in various books. I know I did. Like that was kind of more how it used to go. Don't ask, don't tell, before the age of the internet and before. I always I have so many books that are relevant to this, like, Eli Finkel's The All or Nothing Marriage. Before we were supposed to be married to our soulmate, best friend, financial partner, and hobby partner, people just used to be married, and so you didn't have to be everything to somebody. Guy went on a business trip. If he had sex, no harm, no foul, especially if he wasn't having sex with anybody at home. Like if she's done with sex, the idea of her done with sex, well, then sometimes he could have sex outside marriage, or if he was a religious guy, then he just didn't. However, enter the age of constant internet porn, which fluffs guys up like nobody's business, and I'll talk about that more if you'd like. But then the idea of this biohacking, like I work with all these successful guys, CEO people, they want to hack everything. They're on like testosterone. They're for this. They got this. They got that. They take like 17 supplement things, do weightlifting routines that like a younger man would like pass out. So they think, well, why didn't she just get it fixed? Why doesn't she just go on hormone? Why didn't she just get it fixed? Why didn't she just did it? It never used to be an option. We only came out with a pill in the 60s, Forget about like HRT, and then it used to be considered very, very bad. So men had a lot more kind of patience for something that's insoluble, that's something that they think she's just not trying hard enough to solve it, right? So that's why and also you're not supposed to cheat anymore. Like you're just not, because you're like a bad guy. Men are supposed to be super involved dads and partners and just this whole identity of being a good guy. So frequently they want blood from a stone. She's just done with sex, but they want to be married to their best friend and lover. And so it's got to be both. And it's just, there's no arrangements. I talk to guys where the woman says, go have sex outside the marriage if you want to. And the guy says, no, I want to have sex with you. And she says, well, I just don't want to have sex anymore. So these are the older people, right? Then there are the younger people. And I do feel like it's a culture where there's a lot more autonomy. I have a post in a podcast, the we do what we want marriage ends in sexlessness when her drive drops. Because if both people outside of the frameworks of religion, neighborhood, community, extended family, people are just alone on islands, right? And they do whatever they want. The marriage that is maximized or that is centered around both people maximizing their personal fulfillment. She does her hobby, then he does his hobby, then he travels here, then she does a girl trip, everybody always does what they want, right? Well, what about when she doesn't want sex anymore? They don't even have a language of kind of sacrifice, compromise. You're not sacrificing, compromising either, by the way. So So then it turns into, when I don't feel like it, I don't do it. And that's for both people about everything. But frequently, guys who are more avoidant attachment are okay with that as long as she's having sex. When her drive drops and she says, I don't want to have sex, that's when they think, wait a second, we're not even really emotionally intimate either. I may be avoiding attachment, but I do want to have sex. I want to be in a marriage. And that's when people come into therapy. So it's so multifaceted, and the emphasis on the individual's preferences, nobody doing anything they don't want to do, really does not help with this situation.
No, and that leads me on to a different question, because I'm getting a sense of that, and I've had because I do advocate sex as part of marriage. I have definitely had a growing number of clients come for sort of the initial consultation sort of appointment. And if that comes up, they don't come back, because the feeling is that there's almost like a horror regarding, what do you mean I would have to do something I don't want to do for the good of the marriage? Are you advocating rape? Are you advocating right? So I'm seeing a lot more of that, which doesn't really tie in with the more traditional stance of marriage, which is about mutual generosity. The kind of giving what is needed for the good of the union.
Right. And this is, so I have, I also talk about, you can't have sex with a woman who just lays there. Right. So there have been a lot of people that their marital sex was characterized by her just laying there and thinking of England. And, like she's just there, like not even participating. And then eventually she says, well, basically, like, did you not notice that I didn't like sex? Like this whole time, because I was like closing my eyes, never initiated, never wanted to, like was just laying there like a dead fish. Like, of course I didn't want it. And the guy's like, well, that's the only kind of sex that we've had. So no, I didn't understand it. And then there's massive disconnects in like kind of how this was conceptualized, right? Retrospectively. And often nobody was trying to hurt anybody else, but there was a huge disconnect in what sex is understood to be. In the coercion framework, you can't do anything you don't want to do. So what we work on is wanting to do it, wanting to get in the mood to see if responsive desire will kick in, and trusting and understanding that your husband, and the large majority of guys, this does not even need to be said, but will stop if you say no. So you will try with a full heart to get in the headspace where you are gonna see if responsive desire kicks in. Frequently, women and men have no idea about the transition from spontaneous to responsive desire after the honeymoon stage fades and with age. And so she's waiting to have the drive that she did when she was 25 and single. And guess what? That ain't gonna happen ever again, if she stays married. And that's just a natural transition.
Yeah.
And, that a lot of people don't even know that. So they're sitting there waiting for Godot. They're waiting for something that's just not going to happen.
It was definitely true for me that after our son, and it was complicated for me. Not that I'm saying it was worse for me. That sounded dreadful. I just had complications because I did have somewhat of a difficult childhood. So I had a trauma coming out around the same time, as well as the sort of hormonal changes, and my spontaneous desire had gone. It just gone, and what I was left with. And again, like you're saying, I just didn't know that. If only they taught these things in school rather than just how to put a condom on a banana, we might all be in a different place in our marriages when it goes wrong. But yeah, that was definitely my experience. And it took my husband's loving, what was his loving insistence that we didn't let sex just die between us that really did help me back into the right spot. And thank God that he did, because like you, I believe that there's just no kind of there's just no kind of marriage like a sexually healthy one. It's the most fun.
Right. And then, on both sides, people in life have to make compromises to be together. So is it going to be like you're having sex twice a day, like when you just met? Probably not, But the point being that isn't what most guys want in this situation anyway. They would be happy with a couple times a week or even once a week with hugging and kissing, And I think that many women think that if they open up the floodgates, that he's going to be requesting a lot of crazy stuff. Now, if he is, then that can also be talked about in therapy, or, both people have to moderate their expectations. Frequently, like me, get sex back on track with a couple, and then he has this like backlog of all the stuff he's wanted to do from porn, which I tell him not to use porn, right? But he wants to do all these crazy things, and I'm like, how about like we just like get real, I moderate this into something that is sustainable for 50-something-year-old couple, and not just the ones that you watch when you watch the amateur stuff online, because that's not your average 50-year-old couple. And people who want to stay in a loving and connected marriage need to understand and can learn that compromise, love, sex, all of these things can be done with generosity of spirit. You don't lose yourself when you give to somebody else, just as you don't lose yourself when you give to your kids, unless you're doing it in a sort of massively dysfunctional way that can be explored in terms of looking in at your family of origin. It's a big change for women who are just laying back and thinking of England to think of their own pleasure as part of the experience, but that can be transformative as well, because then you don't just feel like you're just giving out of an empty well. Instead, you're replenishing because you actually enjoy the encounter, which is transformative, obviously.
Yeah, and it's good. To give into that, to remain desirable, to have that side of yourself remain alive, to feel, to dare to stay sexy,
Yes.
to be sensual, to allow yourself to experience sensual pleasures over the course of your life. To me, just sounds like a no-brainer in terms of that would be more positive than kind of just disintegrating in that way. That just feels like a bad choice.
Yes, especially for younger people. I don't think in the 30s and 40s people are meant to be completely sexless. That species has continued, but yet, you see the statistics. People are having less sex than ever before, even young people, having less sex, they're going to less parties, they're even getting their license later. So this is like the idea of engaging with the world or with a partner instead of just retreating into one's self is becoming increasingly feeling dangerous to people and risky. And there's just these siloed people sitting with their smartphones. And, it's kind of this is why marriage rates are dropping. Not just the smartphones, but, the overall cultural shift toward one's self versus larger unit.
Yeah, and that's why I think, that's what propelled us to launch this platform, because I didn't want this wisdom and the reality of a good marriage is a phenomenal source of health and well-being. I kind of didn't want to just not do our bit to shout that from the rooftops. It can be done, people. Russell and I are sort of pushing 25 years now, and we have, because we've cared to, we've sort of lent into every problem as it's arisen, and we've worked out what to do about it, and we've kind of made a decision, and we continue to make a decision pretty much on a daily basis to do whatever is necessary to keep the whole show running, so that both of us feel fulfilled. And I just feel so sad for people that have grown up in this generation that has become increasingly isolated. So much more of their lives are spent on devices. that's how they exist. And we're talking hours. I don't know about you, but I see this in my young clients. I've got clients who will spend literally 16 to 18 hours of their waking day watching pornography, TikTok. They just don't. I mean, to me, that's not a real existence. I don't know what to make of that.
It's very Black Mirror. It just is like completely being like an avatar, and then it makes you increasingly disconnected from any sort of physical reality. And the irony is that the men who are addicted to pornography often are unable to function in bed with a woman, I mean, so it makes things worse on every possible way. It turns into, Brave New World turns into just taking soma constantly, just hooking yourself into the next dopamine hit on the phone. And yeah, I mean, that is also part of the work in couples work, of course, is for individuals to start living more personally fulfilling lives outside of just their phones and outside of their heads.
Yeah, most definitely. Which people do seem rather reluctant to do. Even the people that come to therapy, when they work out that I don't just have this magic wand and a quick fix solution, that they have actually got. They've got work to do themselves. Some of these people, they just don't come back, and plenty stay, of course, and they do the work, which is why I do the job, because it's so fulfilling when people are willing to look at themselves and kind of put the effort in to develop a full life. But a lot of people just aren't. So I'm very aware of time. Are you okay for me to just ask you one more thing? Would that be okay?
Yes.
All right. So just the last question. So what advice would you have to people who are currently living with a hugely sex resistant spouse? The person who has suffered sexlessness, touchlessness, because I agree with you, it's generally the whole thing. It's not just that sex is off the table. She's watching TV, she'll focus on the kids and she'll focus on the job, and it's every other thing, but there's no sex, and she won't talk about it.
Well, I would say that person needs to use something that makes sense to the wife, which is the children. And the motivator is, we do not want our child to have no template for a loving marriage. We are that child's template for a healthy marriage, and we are not doing a good job. I'm not doing a good job, and you're not doing a good job. Nobody's doing a good job. We need to get into therapy. If our child struggles in the future, we would certainly want our child to be able to seek help. We are not modeling that. We are modeling a disconnected, tense, cold environment for our child. And I want to work on this so that we can be the best partners and parents that we can be. Now, in the case of the empty nesters, they do not have much of a leg to stand on. If they say, you say you love me, we want to make this marriage work, I must be doing something very wrong as well. It takes two to tango, and I really want to work on this. I had scheduled with X person at X time. A lot of men in this situation, by the way, are very anxious, and they will not rock the boat. If you say you've scheduled with a counselor, unless that woman wants a divorce, she's going to go. And if she does, well, maybe it was for the best. But many people, they'll say, oh, I tried everything to get my wife into couples counseling. I'll be like, did you tell her that it's very important to you? You've scheduled an appointment. They're like, no, I've not tried that. So I would definitely say that looking for a sex positive therapist, coach, me, you, anybody at my practice, your practice, I'm sure, would be the first step there. And if they will really not come in, then individual work to figure out, how did you get into this pattern? Why can you not assert yourself? Is this the marriage that you want to be in for the rest of your life? Et cetera, et cetera.
Fantastic. I love that. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I could talk to you, but I think I would listen to you talk on any subject. So I'm sorry to have kept it rather confined. I think
yeah,
I would love that, because that would be so good, because listening to you speak on just this one subject has been an absolute treat. It really has. So Dr. Psych Mom, where can people find you? Because I know you obviously run your telehealth practice, which is hugely successful and thriving, but I believe you started with a blog and you have a podcast as well. Yes. So please do tell people.
Right. So drpsychmom.com is where I have all my articles. I've been writing for over 10 years there. And if people want to get therapy or coaching with me directly, they could reach out to me at Samantha@drpsychmom.com. I also have about 12 providers working for me at my practice, Best Life Behavioral Health, which has therapists and coaches and even a sexologist. And of course, people should listen to me on the Dr. Psych Mom show on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere. And I do have a YouTube channel too. So I'm on all social media as Dr. Psych Mom. My YouTube is not as successful as yours yet, but yeah, people can reach out to me on all my platforms, and I have some books out on Amazon, and people could reach me anywhere, anytime. I check my phone, ironically, too much, and so they could make sure to contact me in any of those ways.
And they should, because one of the last things that I'll say about you, Samantha, Dr. Psych Mom, is that you're funny. You are so funny, and your no nonsense, straight talking approach is just so refreshing in an industry that seems to be bending itself double, trying to be diplomatic and not offend anyone, not trigger anyone. To find you, and I'm sort of laughing out loud just because it's just so human and good fun. So you if you're watching, yeah. Oh, it's a pleasure. And yes, do check out Dr. Psych Mom. Do go and look at all the things that she has available for you, because you won't regret it. And yes, hopefully we will do this again in the future.
Let's do it again. It was fun. We're very kindred spirit.
Aligned.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.